Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Fabio Palvelli and I'm a designer. On this channel, I like to talk about the business side of design. So if this is your first time here, please do consider subscribing. I am currently packing my bags. Tomorrow I will be in Budapest for a conference where I've been invited to speak and to host an event on behalf of our friends at Brick Visual, a leading company in the field of archivists. Then after that I'm going to come back to Tel Aviv. There will be a small meetup where I'm going to be speaking, organized by Moshe, my friend and local contact here in this city. And then the day after I'm going to be flying out to Sofia for Total Chaos, which I'm really looking forward to because I've been involved in part of the organization of this event. It has been a lot of hard work and I'm going to be holding 2 presentations and I'm also going to make a vlog about the whole event. Jason is also going to be there. We're going to shoot some interesting interviews with some of the artists at the event. So it's a couple of weeks ahead that are going to be very exciting and I cannot wait to share everything that I'm going to be recording with you guys. But before leaving, I wanted to leave you with this interview that I did with Fabian Geyrhalter. Fabian is just... you know what? I cannot describe that. You'll just have to wait and watch the rest of the video. I promise you, it's worth it. Are you ready?
Sounds good. I am ready if you are.
Fabian, it's weird actually to address somebody as Fabian when my name is Fabio and I'm like Fabian plus Fabio. Are you ready to do this?
I am, my friend. I am.
Fabian Geyrhalter is the founder and principal of Finian. You, Fabian, are a prolific author and a speaker on the subject of branding. Actually, you know what? I know that because I read your book. You are a columnist also for Forbes. You have been published by the likes of the Washington Post, the Entrepreneur Mashable. You have a best-selling book called How to Launch a Brand. You became a go-to resource for entrepreneurs and all creatives alike. Your latest book, which is called Bigger Than This, which I've read and it's fantastic, basically speaks on how to turn any venture into an admired brand. Fabian, you're also the host of the Hitting the Mark podcast, which I've downloaded and then I lost my phone and I could not listen to it, which is a podcast about the intersection of brand clarity and startup success. You are a distinguished Global 100 mentor at the Founder Institute and you have held the position of adjunct professor, right? At the Art Center College Design at the University of South California.
There are 2 different ones. There's Art Center and then there's USC. So there are 2 different ones. But we can merge them. It's a different idea. We should discuss this.
We should talk about this with the management. Right. Fabian, I'm honored to have you on my channel. But before we get into this, I already know that some of my listeners might be a little bit confused as of why I'm having a branding expert on my channel. For those of you who don't know who you are, why should be people watching this video before we get deep into this and then people will be like, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, after such an amazing introduction, why wouldn't they want to listen to this? I mean, that was such a good introduction. I feel like $1 million here. Why should they listen to it? You know, you got to be curious. You got to go through it. You got to see what you learn. I mean, in the end, look, what I think what we're going to jump into today is I do a lot of brand strategy for Silicon Valley type companies, for Fortune 100s. And you most probably don't feel like you fit in, but quite frankly, us as creatives, and I am a creative, I run a creative consultancy, we have the biggest problems differentiating ourselves from everyone else, right? So there's hundreds of you out there, and there's most probably thousands of me out there, right? So the big question is how do we differentiate? And I think that's why you should stick on, because we should dive into that. Because the more you differentiate, the more clients will come to you, the more money you will make, and the happier you will be because you will have the right type of clients.
Okay, let me just divert a little bit from our script because I know that this is not one of the questions that I asked you. But for those who might not be very familiar with the concept of branding, can we just explain a little bit what is branding and how could branding benefit also like a creative company? So like, why would designers be interested in branding?
I mean, most of you, when you think about branding, you must probably think about logos, right? And kind of like the visual representation of a company or of a product, of a service, which is totally correct, right? That's an intrinsic part of branding. But what is left out very often, with common consumers, is that they don't see what's behind the brand, right? And that is brand strategy. And so brand strategy really is defining what Simon Sinek very famously said, like the why, right? Defining the why behind the brand. Like, why would people deeply care about it? Why does the company exist? Why does the brand exist? So that brand strategy, like that is such a big part of branding, and that's why you and I connect very often to a brand, because it's not only how they look, but it's and the logo, but it's about how they make us feel, right? And that is very scripted. So all of those Instagram posts you see, all the Facebook ads you see, all of the advertisements in the streets you see, obviously there's a lot of strategy behind it. It's not just advertising strategy. It comes back to the brand. Like, what does the brand stand for? And that's why you should care about it, because in the end, that's the key differentiator. The rest is about, selling the brand, right? And keeping a brand consistent. So you and I think about a company as a brand rather than, this is just a small business, right? When I ask you what are some brands that you like, you wouldn't say, the coffee shop next door, right? You would say the Nike or the Apple, right? Because they feel like brands, right? But then there are also brands that are only 1 or 2 years old, and you would say they're brands, right? Like Nest or Casper mattresses or Tom's shoes, right? All super young companies. So to turn into a brand, you don't have to be around forever. You just have to do it right, and you have to connect emotionally.
I think this is a very good explanation. Now, I want to jump a little bit onto some of the topics that you touch in your book, because I think that they really light up a light inside my head, and they got me thinking. One of the most important was this end ? DNA. What is this, and how can a creative agency find this end DNA?
So the end DNA, it's really interesting, because I came up with it while writing my last book, Bigger Than This. And just to give your listeners a little bit of a context, what I did with Bigger Than This is I looked at companies that are basically selling commodities, right? And I'm not talking about, usual commodities. I'm talking about shoes and seafood and watches and, stuff that looks exactly how it always used to look, right? No design innovation, like no product innovation, no tech innovation, they're not disrupting anything. So it's really so what type of companies, boring companies, yet people went crazy over them. And I'm like, wait a minute, if these companies can do it, like, what can we all learn from it, right? So I looked at these companies, and basically what happens is that the end DNA, in the end, is really a search for something that is not necessarily inherent in the DNA of the offering, right? Because the offering is just the same old, but in the DNA of a carefully crafted and authentic brand story. So the question, and why should I buy these basic shoes? These great brands answer the end, with an intriguing, with a convincing, with an honest answer that adds a layer to the brand's DNA. And that layer is really the story. And so what's interesting, to add to your question, is after I wrote the book, which now is like, 2 years old, after I wrote it, I do these workshops with clients, right? It's 1 day workshops where I define their brand. And so what I started doing is I started answering that end DNA with the brand DNA, right? So it's basically from end, why, what else is in my DNA? We push into, well, this is your brand's DNA. And really, all brands can define their DNA in one single word, which is mesmerizing to me when you think about it, right? But you think about Harley Davidson, and you think about freedom, right? You think about Coca-Cola and you think about happiness. It's what they do, right? It's like Christmas, Coca-Cola comes around with Santa Claus on it and the polar bear and all that. It's all about happiness, right? It's all about enjoy Coca-Cola, right? Zappos, they're about service. When I had Chris Doe here, who was on your show, so some of you might be familiar with him. He's a friend of mine. When he was on my Hitting the Mark podcast, I asked him, so the future, his company, like what is, if he could define and summarize the entire brand in one word, what would it be? And for him, it was empowerment, right? So the entire company is about empowerment. And my company, Finian, is all about clarity, right? So in the end, when you think about these brands, and you can define even your business, right? Like whatever you do, even if you're just 2-3 people, a small shop, if you can define your company in one word, that is kind of like that aura around it, right? That every client needs to poke through in order to get there. Like that's what you stand for. It's really amazing if you can keep pointing back to it, and everything you do, like for Chris, is all about empowerment. Everything I need to do is about clarity, right? Everything Harley Davidson does is about freedom, right? So it needs to be made in the US, for most of the time, where I think that changed over time. But like, that whole idea of what freedom means to them. So that's really the end DNA. Like what else can you derive out of your company that can answer that question to why with a strong brand DNA?
Fabian, now these things that you have just discussed, they apply to products. A designer that is watching this from home, how do you think they can apply these things to, say, a service like making a logo or making an image for a client that, might say, well, I can get it cheaper somewhere else?
Well, I mean, look, of course, it's a little bit more difficult, right? But I can use my own creative consultancy as an example, right? So in the end, we sell a service too, right? We create brand strategy, we create names for brands, and we even create logos, which, as we all know, logos are a complete commodity, right? Like someone can spend, I don't know, $100 on a logo somewhere from Eastern Europe, or from a freelance designer, or they can spend, like $500,000 with one of the key brand agencies like Interbrand or Futurebrand, right? So my own creative consultancy, I do what everyone else does, but I need to find a way to do it in my own way, right? So there needs to be something where I say, okay, look, these are things that I do differently. And I think that's why, and I strongly believe that it needs to be done differently, and I shared it with my clients. For instance, brand strategy is usually done in weeks. So everyone within my industry does it in weeks, right? So they constantly meet with the clients, lots of spreadsheets, all that stuff. I learned, because I ran an agency for a good 12 years, I learned that I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it in one day. It's the only way that I do it. So if someone says, no, we need to roll it out differently, I'm like, I don't do that. If someone says, I can't do it because I don't have the budget to fly you out, or I don't have the budget to fly in, I'm like, I don't do it, right? It's the only way that we do it. But we do it with a couple of key people. And, I did it in Miami, I did it in San Francisco, I did it with Warner Brothers, I did it with Honeywell, and I do it with small startups. And it's a way to differentiate. I just say, look, like, because I know so much, right? Like I can do all of this in one day, and this is how we do it. And if they say, oh, can you send me a proposal? I'm like, I don't do proposals. I just don't do proposals. They're like, can you send me an estimate? I'm like, yes, but you know what? I'm just going to send you one page that has my process on it with the numbers and everything. And I can already tell you right now on the phone call, it's going to cost you exactly this much. It's going to take exactly that long, because that's all we do. We do it all the time. Yeah. So, that's it. So they're in shock, because they're like, well, no, because I need to get a full-on presentation. I need to get a deck. I need to get something customized. And I'm like, we don't do that. We're so good that we always do this. And here it is in one page, and that's all we do. So again, it's like, I never upsell. I've got one fee, it's one deliverable, and it's not what we do, which is branding, right? But it is how we do it. And that resonates with a specific client, and that really differentiates us. And I feel that every creative company can think about, how do we offer our services that are different from others? Or do we have a certain process? Because every process is the same, right? You go to every creative agency, finding phase, like discovery phase. And I'm like, BS phase, right? Like, it's like no one cares. It's like it's all the same. Everyone thinks they've got this amazing process, but in the end, most of us don't, right? And I think it's important. And I also think it's extremely important for creative agencies to talk about money.
Yeah.
And to put their pricing on their website. We're about to do this ourselves. It is so important, right? To actually say, to everyone, there's such a peer pressure on the creatives to all kind of like, how do they do it? Oh, we got to do it cooler than them. Oh, how do they do it, right? And everyone kind of has to fit in, but wants to stand out visually. But instead, you just have to start standing out conceptually, right? Verbally, strategically, with a business point of view, like your clients, like think like your clients, right?
I understand everything that you're saying. It really resonates with, I spend a lot of time thinking about these things. How can I give the possibility to designers to actually think about this stuff and look at the way you can generate value by not melting together with the mass. How can you do it differently? And I understand that, it's very difficult for everybody to come up with an exclusive way, but I guess that at a certain point you gotta start somewhere, and if you never do, you'll never stand out, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you had someone on your show, Sam Maceo, right? He's a lawyer, and he's actually down the street from us, in San Diego, right? We're up in LA. He's a lawyer. Every lawyer works the same way. Every lawyer's website looks the same way, right? They're all exactly the same. But this guy, who I totally fell in love with what he's doing, so I'm actually going to have him on my podcast. Thanks to you. From Fabio to Fabian in like no time. So I'm going to have him on my show too, because I want to ask him how he did, because his whole thing is, and he's super transparent. So he basically says, we're lawyers, but we're people like you, right? And they use like, they use like crazy like language on the website. They say, look, here are all of our prices. Like, this is how much we charge for all of that. And there's never going to be a hidden fee. That's it, right? And think about lawyers. No lawyer does that, right? So, but why did he do it? Because he looked outside of his bubble, right? And he looked in like, okay, so what does the next generation need in lawyers? Well, lawyers have a problem, right? They're not transparent. They're constantly extra fees. They think they're going to be like weird people that they can't relate to, all of that stuff. So in my eyes, he must have made a list to figure out, these are all the misperceived conceptions about lawyers. How can we flip each one on its head? And what do? You connect with the people you want to connect with. It's the same with a creative services company, right? Who hires you? Who is that person? What does that person like? What are other brands that person likes? In the end, these people are not strangers. They're most probably, they have a lot in common with you, right? And they want to be approached the same way you want to be approached. So maybe all of that design talk and all of these special words that you use, maybe they don't understand them. Maybe they don't need them. Maybe they don't buy into them, right? So sometimes it's about dumbing it down for people to understand it, and sometimes it is about going completely against the grain with what your industry does in order for you to stand out. Because that's my big thing. It's like, I see all these creatives that talk at creative conferences, right? And I'm like, you shouldn't. You should talk at business conferences. Like, if you're a freaking architectural renderer, you shouldn't talk at the 3D. Of course, your conference, everyone should talk at, right? But they should go there, right? But they should talk at a conference about like what's next in architecture, or like whoever the people are that hire them, right? Maybe the PR companies of huge skyscrapers in New York. Who are these PR companies? Maybe you should speak at a PR conference, right? But no creative does that. So it's really like you have to get out of that mindset of like it's all the creative love and we always surround ourselves with creatives. No, like surround yourselves with the people that actually buy your stuff.
But you know how many times we got pushed back by some artists because we're like, okay, we're also interested a little bit in the way you handle real life situations, because, you know, you show us how your work is done and it's all very pretty. But, you know, we need to start talking about how to convey what we do into value. And I think that, you know, we work for companies that make millions with the work that we do. I just think it's fair to kind of like share the wealth, not because we want to become necessarily richer. It's because we want to establish a certain durability and in German you would say Nachhaltigkeit, or how do you call it?
Nachhaltigkeit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what do you call that in English? Like, that you want to make sure that you're in business in 10 years, in 15 years, you know? And you cannot...
it should be sustainable and retainable, right?
That's the word.
Yeah.
This is so weird that I'm switching to German more than Italian.
We can speak German anytime, but you know, we both would most probably lose listeners in like, you know, a second. If we start talking German together, this would be a disaster waiting to happen.
Why are these guys so mad?
No, but I mean, look, I can give you an example, right? So I ran a graphic design agency in Santa Monica for 12 years. I had up to 18 people at some point in my agency. So it was a good agency, decent size, right? And at some point I didn't enjoy it anymore, right? So I didn't enjoy that it grew so fast. We started taking on all this business that wasn't really amazing business, just business to keep going because I had so many mouths to fill, right? I mean, there are so many people on payroll. Long story short, I decided that I'm going to close my agency while it was doing really well because my heart and soul wasn't in it anymore, right? And I started a 2-people consultancy. Now, in the second year of my consultancy, the income of my consultancy was close, if not exact, to the income of my graphic design agency that employed, you know, like 12 full-timers and a couple of freelancers. So think about this. I have 2 people, right? It's the same amount of income that I had with like 12 people. But that's thinking about the value that you provide and strategically positioning yourself for a small, narrow audience, right? And I think that that's something that we should talk about too, because with creatives, it's so important. It's like, usually it's like, well, we do everything for everyone, right? Or we have one skill and let's just make sure that everyone hears about it so that everyone can come to us. But if you say, okay, so we have one skill, what if we cater it to one out of these like 10, you know, clienteles, right? Like there's a niche. And if you go into a niche, then you can start talking about that niche. You start becoming the best person in that niche, right? You do architectural renderings for only a certain type of, you know, of architectural, you know, like subgenre, right? And you only do it for them. You become the number one in doing that much, much quicker than if you do everything for everyone, right? And I think that's important. That's important for people to understand. Like, don't be afraid. You can still be extremely creative, but you could start talking about it like an expert. And people like to hire experts, right? They're like, this is important for us. And the minute if it's important for us, they're going to hire an expert. It's the same with you, right? If you have an old Volvo station wagon, right? And you're going up to Kitzbühel or wherever, right? And it's like freaking snowing like crazy. And you know you need your tires changed. You know, you are going to go to the Volvo dealer and you're going to spend, you know, like a couple €100 or €1,000 extra to get the same work done that you could get done at the garage around the corner who does it for no money, right? Super cheap. It's trust. You're like, they're the experts. This is important. I have my family in my car. It's going to snow. I want to spend the extra money. So as a creative agency, you have to become that expert where they say, well, I could hire any agency, but I want to hire them because that's all they talk about. That's all they do. Like, they're the experts.
I have a couple of examples for this kind of stuff, but, you know, I have a bunch of questions that I still want to ask you. And believe it or not, we're already talking for like 25 minutes.
Oh boy, we're going to talk for hours.
Okay, so let's just go back a little bit because you talked about running your own agency. So let's, you know, segue in that direction. what are the prerequisites for someone that want to open a creative agency? Is it enough today in 2019 to say, you know what? I know a guy that has a company. They do, logos, 3D renderings. They do graphic design, whatever. I can also do that. I know the software. I'm going to start a business.
Well, it's definitely possible, right? It's not sustainable, but it's possible, right? So, I mean, that's kind of what I learned the hard way myself, right? You can totally start a creative agency tomorrow. And a lot of kids do it, right? They're like, oh, I can create great Instagram stories and posts, and I can be creative, and I know Photoshop and whatever, right? And I've got the equipment. But in the end, it takes emotional intelligence and it takes business skills. And both of it, is something that you have to acquire over time, right? And so even if you would go and do an MBA, most probably it's not going to help you that much, right? So you can't just start a business. You can, but you have to learn, right? And so the problem that I see with a lot of creative agencies, the same with me, right? I mean, it took me 12 years to figure that out, right? So it's not like I'm like the smart guy in the room. I'm the older guy in the room that's actually went through it, right? And that had enough guts to say, I'm going to make a huge switch, which is crazy. And most people don't do that, right? Yeah. And I had the right, wife that said, okay, let's just risk everything. And I hope that this is going well, right? It takes a lot to do that. I think the one advice that I have when creatives say, I'm going to start my business and, I've got the skills, hire consultants, hire mentors, or get mentors that can be for free, right? Hire coaches. You need to have someone out there that infuses and teaches the skills that you lack to run a prospering business. And I learned that all the time. I was just on a phone call yesterday with a guy that I'm hiring for a good amount of money, and I wasn't sure, should I not? And, he's just going to do some consulting for my own business. We're going to look at the clients. We're going to analyze the clients. We're going to, do stuff that you're like, should I really spend, a couple $1,000s on something like that? And the answer is always yes. You should. I'm running this thing myself. I've got one, creative lead here. She's doing a lot of the creative work. I need that. I need people around me that look at my business from different angles and that keep making me a better business person, a better leader. And I think that creatives are so introvert, and creatives are, they don't have fun doing that, right? It's fun creating. But business is not supposed to always be fun. Yeah. And that's what makes business fun. That you actually, you run into problems, you run into hurdles, or you feel like, oh my God, why did I only make $200,000 last year, as an example, right? I should be making 600. Well, you can't, then you have to take risks, and then you have to spend money in order to get there, right? You have to spend money in order to make money. It's the same old, right?
Fabian, I'm going to ask you a question, and let me warn you, we're going to poke straight into the eyes of all the designers that follow my channel. So that's when we're gonna get haters, both of us. So
I'm sure we already have them. Cheers to our haters.
Do you think artistic skills are everything when it comes to running a creative business?
No.
Good. Let's move on.
I think I kind of already voiced my opinion in the last answer, right?
I know. I wanted to have it recorded.
Look, I mean, I was a darn good designer. I loved designing, right? I worked so hard. I had a day job, as a creative director, working for the Acura car brand. And then at night I came home and I did freelance work for MGM. And I did it all night. I slept maybe 2 hours, right? And I did this for years and years and years because I loved it. But guess what? It's going to kill you. Right? If you just do it for the love of it, then it turns into a hobby. It's most probably going to make you less money, and it's most probably going to make you sick over time, right? So at some point you got to pivot and say, let's run a professional company. Let's be 9 to 5. I like 9 to 5. I really, really like it. When did we start our interview today, Fabio? 9 a.m., right? When am I out of here today? 5 p.m., right? But that doesn't mean that I don't love creative. I just learned how to not do a certain piece of creative and how to do more creative strategy, and hand the creative to someone here at my company who I constantly interact with, So I still have the love for it, but no, creative skills aren't everything. I mean, a lot of creatives are really, really poor business people. And it's sad because, the ones who aren't, they're really rocking and rolling it.
I know. It's sometimes I hear stories that, it's not worth to bring on the channel right now, but it really makes you understand that, I don't know, sometimes I also feel a little bit guilty because I know that my crowd, those who come to the D2 conference, they enjoy to see the artistic side of things. But even more, there should be always a discussion, even when somebody's able to make something pretty, how can we convey rational value into this and not just the pursuit of like beauty, because sometimes people get distracted by it. I'm not saying that it's not important. It's just that, we lose focus from what the prize is at the end of the race.
Look, I give you a great example, Fabio. There's so many softwares out there right now that make crap look great. Right? There's so many like filters, and there's so much stuff out there that where let's say you design a brand, you design an identity, you can within 20 minutes make the identity look like it's on every single billboard and it looks great here and there and it's like the real deal. Yeah. It's a problem. It's a problem because when I look at all of that work, I start thinking it's real, but it's not real. And it starts making really bad work look really great. Yeah. But it's a problem, right? Because in the end, it's like it shouldn't be this way, right? Like really great work should be on a billboard. Really great work should be the one that you look at it and you're like, wow, they actually made it. Like this is a national company. And now you look at Behance and you look at all of those online sites and you're like, you don't know anymore what is real and what is fake. And I think that's why it's important to talk about value, and that's why it's important to talk about money. That's why it's important to say, I'm going to present to you this amazing design journey. And at the end of it, everyone is like, this is so beautiful. And well, I only made $500 on it. Yeah, so it kind of sucked, and the client was a complete a-hole, right? And it's like, well, but maybe we should know these stories, like really, like what really happened. Or here's a design that we're not proud of, but it worked really well for the target audience and it generated so much ROI and the company afterwards went public or whatever. That's an important story to listen to as well, right?
ROI, for those who don't know, it's return of investment. You never know.
Indeed.
Okay, listen, I want to go back a little bit to the initial questions that I had for you. This is all incredibly interesting, and I'm so, it always happens like this. I can never keep my eyes on the road because it's like there are so many ways to steer away from the core of the discussion. But I remember you saying in one of the previous interviews, I think it was with Chris, that there is no reason to have design without strategy. I agree 100% with this, but would you mind, please, for those who don't know, expand a little bit on this?
Well, that's funny because that kind of exploded the internet that morning. All designers are like, what is he saying? And then they're all like, yes, that's right. Look, I think, it's not much different from form and function, right? Form and function in product design, no one questions. It's like, that's what it takes, form and function. And in communication design and in advertising, you need both. You need beauty, right, the design, and you need the message, right, which is a strategy. So really the idea why I say, there's nothing without strategy is not because I'm like, I'm preaching the gospel of strategy, maybe also, but it's really because it ensures we have the right message for the right audience, right? That's what strategy does. And it doesn't matter if it's a visual message or a verbal message, right? But it's key for anyone who creates designs that should have a commercial versus solely an artistic value. And I think that's the difference, right? Because if it's the weekend and I'm going into my studio and I'm recording some music, I know no one's ever going to listen to it. I do it for myself. If someone listens to it, I'm like, awesome. But most probably it's going to be 5 people that are ever going to purchase it. I'm never going to make a living off of it. But that's not the reason. I do it the way that I want to do it, right? It's very selfish. It's like it's an expression of myself. That's not what commercial design is about. That's not what communication design is about, right? You have a very specific message that you need to convey. And that really, in the simplest form, is the strategy. Right? Like, who are the people that need to see your videos about a certain architectural piece, right? What kind of design speaks to them, right? What kind of language speaks to them, right? It's that kind of stuff, and that's strategy. So without the strategy, it's basically, without a creative brief, there is no end result. Right? That's the same thing, right? You need that brief in order to understand it, and then you need to strategically deliver it.
I think once Blair Enns said something like, it's like shooting without a target.
Exactly. It's the same difference, right? It's the same difference.
Okay, let me ask then the consultant in you. Say we have a design business that is struggling with like finding better paying clients. Let's say that you're called in as an external consultant. What are the areas that you would begin to examine and tackle in order to fix this so that, this firm can start to attract new / more / better clients?
All of it. Yeah. Well, as I told you offline, we don't work much with creative businesses besides Hollywood creative businesses, right? Like film, like all of that. It's mainly because they either don't have a budget or they don't see the need. But what I would be doing is I would do it like I do with all of my other clients. I would do this 1-day intensive where I literally would sit down with the owners or like the VPs or anyone, like, if it's a small firm, with everyone, right? And we would define what makes your firm different. Like, why would they pick you, right? So we would analyze the offering. We would analyze, the process, the pricing, the market, hopefully like past clients could be interviewed. And you can do that yourself, right? I mean, you can interview your past clients, the good and the bad ones. And then see like even the ones that never made it past the first email, right? I'm sure you get it all the time when someone says, hey, I'm interested in your services. And you're like, oh my God, that's great. So let's talk. And then you never hear back from them. Like, why is that? Right. And in the end, it really comes down to define who you actually love to work with. Right. And then you interview them, and then you use their words in your language to attract more of the same type of client. So I did that myself. I have a client in Poland, which is strange because I'm in LA. And he's one of my favorite clients, super great guy. He's running an interactive, agency, he's been doing it forever. And he hired me to do a lot of work with him. And so at some point I'm like, I'm going to interview him and ask him how he sees the value that I give him. And it's so interesting. My clients never use the word branding. Only I do. They could care less, right? So it might be the same thing with what you do. They might not use your term. So what he said, I brought focus to what they were doing. It was like putting glasses on for the first time, right? So it created clarity. And guess what our tagline now is, right? We create verbal, visual, strategic brand clarity. Right. So I took it straight out of his mouth and onto our website. And that's important, for creative businesses to listen to their clients, how they, take them out for lunch, or have a glass of wine with them after work, right? Or just get them on a call, say, look, I want to understand more about my business and how people, feel about it. Or you can just say, we're making some changes to the website and the copy. Do you have 10 minutes to talk with me? And then just say, why did you hire me versus someone else? Like, what did you find out that you feel we do really great at, or what do we do really, really bad at, right? Like, what is it? But hear it from them and use the words. And if you do that with like 3-4 clients, hopefully more, you start having all these same words. And you're like, oh, that's how they think. That's how they talk. Let's use these words and put them into our own messaging.
I think there is a lot of value in this, and I probably should start doing that about myself as well. I think
we all should.
I think that some people are just afraid to ask because the answer will be like, because you're cheap.
But see, people are afraid to hear the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it isn't even that. Sometimes they're afraid to hear something and then they never hear that, you know. I mean, if they know that people come to them because they're cheap, then they need to change their business.
Yeah.
Period, right? Because I mean, then you're not much different than someone who runs a liquor store, or you know, like, you know, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right.
That, right? So you know, you have to find a way. You have to find a way to make enough money. I mean, look, life costs more every day, right? I mean, it's insane how expensive things are these days, right? So if you want to live your parents' life, you know, and have like a nice house and maybe a holiday home, a vacation home, and you know, have a family of 2, like, make the math. It's a boatload of money, right? And then if you want to live not a luxurious lifestyle, but a great lifestyle, think about how much money you need to make.
Yeah.
And then work from there and say, okay, how can I change my services that they're still honest and that I still love doing it, but how can I create more value for my clients?
Yeah, it's true. Fabian, okay, so before we touched a little bit on this idea of becoming an expert in your own field, creative companies are very good at telling stories for their clients. That's why they get hired, you know, hopefully in the best case scenario. Yet very often creative companies fail at telling their own story. So, you know, a lot of companies, they're very good at making their own work, but they don't do the same with themselves. What are, according to you, some of the golden rules that a creative agency should follow so that they can position themselves as experts in the eyes of their clients?
You know, I'm going to start sounding like a you know, a stuck record, right? It's a record on repeat, which is totally fine because I think people learn when they hear something over and over, totally. Right? So I think I mentioned each one of these 3 points, but to me it's important to say that again. It's like, take the same time to tell your client's story to tell your own story, right? So when you get a new client, you sit down, you actually work on it, you think about it, you think about like, what is the story I need to convey? Whenever do you do that about your own company? You never do that, right? So do that and have empathy. Think like your client, you know, when you create your story. The second, and I think that's really tough for a lot of creatives, and it was really, really tough for me too. You have to become, and it's a horrible word, but you have to become a thought leader, right? You want to be seen as a leader, right? Because that's what your clients want you to want to see you as, right? So a lot of us are introverts. A lot of creatives are introverts, right? Like, we live in our creative world and we kind of like, you know, we don't want to work for others. We work for ourselves. There's kind of this pattern, but you have to start sharing your wisdom. Like, we all think we don't have wisdom, but that's because we work in our tiny little niche and everyone around us has the same wisdom or similar wisdom. Well, no, like the others out there, they don't know about that, right? Like your clients actually don't know about that. So voice your opinion. And last but not least, it's the whole idea of big fish in a small pond, right? Like, have a narrow niche, right? Which is amazing because if you have a narrow niche that you work in, it's going to become so much easier for you to become a subject expert, right? Because you just keep talking about it. I said all of those 3 things again, but you know, before, but I say it again, right? It's so important because those are 3 steps that I did. And I didn't take them because I love to write or I love to speak in front of hundreds of people. Who loves that? Most people don't, right? It's freaking scary, right? You've got 800 people and you're doing this keynote speech. It is scary, right? But you do it because you know that in the end, it's going to be really good for your business. That's why you do it. And of course, because you want to share something that you feel really good about and a lot of people are going to get the value, right? But in the end, you have to set these goals of like why you need, how you can get to the place where you need to be.
Absolutely. Fabian, in your book, you mentioned transparency, and we touched already a little bit in the very beginning of our conversation. Transparency as a way to gain clients' trust. And you have these commandments in your book, which we're not going to mention because I think that people should actually buy the book because, it only takes you 2 hours to read it. It's very well designed. It's pleasant. I like those books where you say, oh, a page is already done. Okay, great. And, and you're getting something that it's real life. I really enjoyed it, I have to say. And it's not because I have you on the show. I think that it's done extremely well. My question to you is, how do you differentiate things like transparency when running an office that produces a type of service or product that can be considered by an average client a commodity?
Well, I mean, look, in the end, I would start with the idea that transparency creates immediate trust, right? So if you say, look, everything we do, we're completely transparent about it, like the Sam Maceo example in the beginning, the lawyer in San Diego, right? If he says on his website, we're complete straight shooters, this is what we do, this is how much we charge, we're just like you. Isn't that great? Like high five, right? Yeah. That creates immediate trust. You don't even have to do that yet, right? I mean, hopefully you will, but you don't even have to do that yet. You just say, we're completely transparent. And as a product company, it's easy, right? Like if you're an apparel company and you say, we're going to share exactly where the product comes from, that, like no like child labor, right? That it's like good materials. We tell you how much it costs to make the shirt and then, how much you have to pay. And this is why. That is trust, right? I immediately trust that company because they do that. And so, I have a quote in the book by John Legere, who is the crazy charismatic CEO of T-Mobile, right? And at some point, I'm sure everyone has seen him somewhere, in a business book. But he said this great thing. He said, I saw more honesty on Match.com in an ad than I saw on AT&T's coverage map, right? So the idea is like that is, of course, he's talking crap about his competitor, which he loves to do. But because he's saying like, look, this is completely fake and we're transparent and we tell you exactly what it is, people like T-Mobile more. I'm not saying people love any cell phone, company, but they like T-Mobile more than the competitors, right? And so as a service business, to get back to your question, you can do the same thing. I mean, have dashboards, right? Have real-time info, like who's working on the project at any moment, right? Where's the project at any given time, right? Like, what do these clients really want to know? Like how can you be transparent in a service business? I also think what I mentioned before with I don't do proposals, I don't do the dance, I'm just straight shooting. I'm like, on that call, I tell them, look, this is how it's going to be done. And here's a one-pager. To me, that creates trust because it's like, oh, this guy's completely prepared, but he doesn't dance the dance that all the other agencies do. I mean, it's crazy, right? It's like the way that I won a big project at Warner Brothers is that they called me and they said, hey, we're doing an RFP. And I think everyone knows what an RFP is, right? We're doing an RFP and we would love your company to be involved.
Request for proposal, sorry.
Yeah, we want a proposal from you. And I remember I was like, turning off the freeway. I was in the car taking the call and I stopped and I said, the only problem is I don't do proposals and I don't participate in RFPs, but I really believe that we would have a much better way of doing this, than you propose right now. And she was just like in shock. Like no one ever tells Warner Brothers that they're not going to do it this way. That's just not what they do, right? So I immediately was one step up. It was a huge risk, right? But I was one step up. So then she said, well, let me talk to our, like VP, and so a day later, she writes the most polite email saying, like, hey, Fabian, I don't want to steal too much of your time, but would it be possible for you to maybe just come in and meet our VP for like half an hour? He would be really interested to hear your opinion. So what I just did by having attitude like that, right? Like I didn't have to create a proposal, which, takes like so much time and money, right? And I didn't have to come in with like a team of 8, even though I only have 2 or whatever, right? Like that whole show, right? I just sat on the couch with the VP, telling him how he should be doing this and why. And I won the job. All the other ones had to do the presentations, and I didn't even have to do a presentation. They still had to, they already knew they're going to hire me, right? So to me, I think that's important, right? That you find your way, that you say, no, I don't do this because in the end, it's going to be better for you and it's going to be better for me.
Can I just add one little thing to what you said? Because, we have a lot of young people watching this and they're going like, okay, from now on, this is going to be how I'm going to do it. You have how many years of experience?
Enough that my hair is slowly turning gray. So I've got, I ran an agency for 12 years. I did like 6 years as creative director, and now my consultancy is for 5 years. So the thing is, like, people can read up about me and they're like, oh, this guy is legit. Right? Like, he's been around, he can talk that way. And I totally appreciate that, Fabio, because I don't think anyone should go out and do that. But the reason why I say this is because you should always look at yourself again, right? Like, what are the strengths, right? Like, and how do you think you can change things in the creative industry and go against the grain and do something in a different way that in the end the client will appreciate? They don't want the work. They don't want to have to go through proposals and presentations. It's a waste of time. Yes. They just want to have a reason why they should pick you.
Yeah, you're totally right. Fabian, listen, you have shared with us a lot of value today. I am very happy that you actually agreed to do this thing with me. It humbles me because, we can consider you an authority in the creative world. So I really hope that people will also appreciate your take on things and that they can maybe learn something from you. I fear a little bit that, sometimes younger people, they just want to stick it up to, the status quo. I don't know. I hope that people understand that we're encouraging others to do better by sharing knowledge, and we're not trying to block people from doing better. We just want people to learn from those who have already figured out things. And maybe, they can take this knowledge and try to do something new, something innovative. I'm very thankful for you lending us your time. If people want to talk to you, if they want to listen to your podcast, where should they go?
Absolutely. So first off, it was my pleasure, and everything you said is absolutely correct. I say, if I would have had mentors when I was younger, right, running my agency for 12 years, I would have run it so much better, and it would have helped me so much. So I think, like, go out there, try to find people that want to help you, right? Like, and understand that it is good for you to grow your business. So where people can find me is at Finien.com. That's FINIEN.com. That's my consultancy. They can check out the podcast at hittingthemarkpodcast.com, or they can read my books at biggerthanthis.com or howtolaunchabrand.com. Lots of domain names there. And I'm to be found everywhere there, and people can reach out, write me an email. Absolutely. Be in touch.
I'm going to put all these links in the description. Fabian, thanks a lot for doing this. I'm going to stop the recording. Don't go anywhere. I want to thank you one more time before we say goodbye, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot again, man.